Welcome, everyone.
Hi, gang.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am so happy to be here with you tonight, along with Lynn Ames, who's going to be reading and sharing from her latest work, 46. My name is Ann Geary. I'm a former board member of the Golden Crown Literary Society and at current a volunteer for the October Book Club. So thank you very much. I really appreciate you joining us tonight.
Thanks,
Uh,
everybody, for being here. I really appreciate it, too.
so to kick us off, Lynn, thank you for I love the vote. I love I love your vote mask. Thank you so much for reminding us. And we do have a special evening tonight. Directly after this, we know that there is some debate
Oh,
maybe happening. So we're going to try to get things going here and then get you out a few minutes before so you could take a quick bio break or grab your favorite beverage to prepare.
I need a potty break right before Kamala comes in.
So I just wanted to let me read a little bit for those of you who aren't familiar with Lynn and her work. Lynn Ames is a multi-award-winning author of 16 novels. Prior to becoming an author, Lynn was an award-winning broadcast journalist, press secretary to the Senate Democrats in New York State, spokesperson for the nation's third largest prison system, and has written entire speeches and or lines in speeches for presidents, governors, and state senators. So you know what you're talking about. So this book was probably easy for you. but despite that, I do want to start with a question around how this story, which I loved many times over, if you could tell us how that story developed for you, Lynn.
Sure. First of all, thank you all for being here. I'm so grateful that you're here. And you should see the other guy. I'm just going to say that right up front. Now I'm going to have a problem, right? Right now. Momentito, por favor. Diet ginger ale. Everyone should have one. The way this story came about was quite simply, every book that I write starts with the same question. And the question is, what if? And in this instance, as the last 3.5 years, 4 years have started to progress, we've all sort of been asking ourselves, how do we get back from this place where everything is so divisive and so partisan and so nasty. It's just nasty, and not nasty in the way that Donald Trump says that's a nasty question. No, but nasty in the terms of the way we deal with each other, the lack of respect and all of that. And I started, wondering to myself, how do we come back from a place like this? Is there a way back from a place like this? And of course there is. Actually, we're going to build back better, like Joe says, right? But yes, of course, there is a way for sure to get back from this. But I started asking the question of myself, well, what would you do? If you were the one advising the president, what would you do? How would you do this? If you were the president, how would you do this? And that was the core issue that drove me to create 46, because I thought, I need to do something hopeful and helpful that will give people in this dark time something to hold on to, something that they can point to or point toward that will be gentler and kinder and possible. And I do believe that it is possible. I do believe that what I suggest in 46 is absolutely possible.
When you were writing this book, which was had so much detail in it, so many significant speeches that were in it.
Those are the most fun to write. I love writing those.
On one hand, you've got somebody in politics at the highest echelon. On the other hand, you've got the other primary character was in the military, and so much detail that goes into both of those areas. What was the research that went into this, to your book?
Oh my goodness.
How did you create this?
Well, for one thing, I have some personal experience, and that was very helpful. As I said, I have personal experience writing politicians' speeches. And in addition to that, I've been in the White House a number of times. I've gotten the personal tour in the White House, so I knew the setup. I knew what it looked like. I knew most of those kinds of things. I have lobbied Congress and the U.S. Senate, and been in senators' offices and Congress people's offices, and I've been in the Capitol many times. So the settings were not unfamiliar to me. Now, some of the details were, the nice details that I was able to add were the result of calling people. I'm an ex-reporter, and when you're an ex-reporter, the thing you do is go primary source if you can. And so I reached back for some contacts that I had. In most cases, these were contacts that I had who either knew the answers themselves or lent me to somebody else who could help me. So just to give you a quick run through, for instance, the reality of the president's movements, the Secret Service movements, and how the protocols with regard to the president. I actually went to college. I was college classmates with the guy who was press secretary for George W. Bush.
Mm.
Ari Fleischer, you might recognize the name. Ari is as far apart from me politically as you can possibly get. But I reached out to him. He's been a friend for 40 years or more. We don't ever talk politics. He was we were co-presidents of the Student Senate at college. He was the editor of the college newspaper. I was the director of the college news operation at the radio station. So we've known each other a very, very long time. And I reached out to Ari and I said, I need some specific details, details that if you can't give me, you'll tell me that, it's classified and I can't know that. And the ground rules that we set when we started talking were, we don't talk politics. And the one thing that he asked of me, he said, you are not going to mention 45's name in the book, are you? And I said, I don't want to ruin the reading experience for my readers. So no, no, I'm not going to mention him, in any way. And I promise you that I won't. And then, so I talked to Ari 2 or 3 times. And, one of the questions that I asked him is, tell me the things that everybody gets wrong about the process and about protocol. And so he told me some things that the West Wing always got wrong. And he told me some things that the American President got wrong. The movie, The American President, everybody loves. It's like my favorite movie with Michael Douglas and Annette Bening, right? Oh my goodness. Anyway, so he told me those kinds of things. So in those scenes, like for instance, when I have them going to New York on Marine One, and when I have them going to Dover, to Andrews Joint Base Andrews, it's called now. It used to be Andrews Air Force Base, and all of those things are exact and precise, and all of that is very, very true. The layout of the White House, every room, every detail about the changing of the guard that happens on the day of inauguration, all of that is accurate. Everything in that book about the presidency and about protocol with regard to the presidency is absolutely certified accurate by someone who's been there. And by the way, I could have told you about the medical suite in the White House a lot before you heard it on the news this past week. Mm-hmm. They do have everything there available at their disposal. The reason to go to Walter Reed is simply that, they've got more experts available quickly.
Right.
That's it. So that's how I did the presidential piece. The more difficult piece for me, there were 2 pieces that were more difficult than that. One of them particularly was that I have no military background, 0, absolutely none. And so for me, that was a whole new world that I needed to explore. And I knew that I had some friends in the military in very high places in the military who could help me with this. Mm-hmm. And so I reached out first to one of our GCLS members, Deborah Shea, Brigadier General Deborah Shea, retired. Mm. And Deborah was invaluable. Her career was in intelligence in the Middle East. and in Afghanistan and places like that, and in Iraq. And she was very, very helpful in all of that. And particularly when I got to this instant of, what happened on 9/11 in the Pentagon, that was a word for word, helpful. The creation of the berm that I talked about and all of those things that Palmer did, those were things that really happened that day. And so in addition to Deborah then introduced me to two other generals. One was retired Brigadier General Rose Loper, who Rose, after she graduated from, after she left the military, she became Boeing's very first female test pilot. But in the military, she was a crack flyer. So, I mean, she can fly anything. And she virtually taught me to fly a Black Hawk helicopter, which was the most amazing thing in the world.
That's
you
awesome.
know. And then Deborah also introduced me to Major General Tammy Smith. And Tammy, if you don't know, was the very first out flag officer in the military. And she and her wife Tracy still are, well, Tammy is still serving. So she read through the book with me, page by page, gave me suggestions, talked to me about protocol, corrected me when I was wrong, helped me to understand, some other things. But all of those details from the military, I can tell you, are also accurate. They're accurate militarily, and the things that happened in the Situation Room are accurate because I had them and I had Ari. Together, I got both ends of that and understood, both sides of the equation in a way that I might not have understood if I had only one piece or the other. And that was really, really helpful. And then my childhood friend, my longtime childhood friend, Dr. Jenny Levy, introduced me at just exactly the right moment when I needed an emergency physician. And I don't know whether you all have read the book yet or not. I don't want to spoil too much in case anybody out there has not yet read it. But the medical detail is actually a true case study that this doctor, who was head of an emergency trauma center, encountered with one of his patients. It was true, everything I said, and I know if you've read the book and you read the details, you're like, that could never happen. And he said it's exactly what happened right in front of his eyes. And so the level of detail I had in that was also the result of an expert who gave me everything, and he was wonderful about it, truly. So I was very, very fortunate. And this is a really long answer to your question.
But no, this is great detail. This is great detail.
But this is the kind of thing that goes into a book like this, because, if any of this detail is not accurate, you get pulled out of the story. And if you get pulled out of the story, then I've lost you. And I don't want to lose you as readers. I want you to, my rule of thumb is that an expert in whatever genre I'm talking about, whatever, profession or whatever life circumstance I'm talking about, should be able to read my book and say, yes, not that it did happen that way, but that it could happen that way.
Right. Excellent.
Somebody else talk.
I actually would like to ask you one more question, and then maybe you want to go into read a little bit from the book for us.
Sure.
I'm going to ask a question from Tammy Lynn. She had submitted this ahead of the actual event tonight. It says from Tammy, my question is, what was your inspiration for the romance between Emma and Palmer? Was this around something more personal to you, or something that you maybe experienced with others, seen in other people? So.
Okay, so the answer is no. The romance between Emma and Palmer was organic between those two characters. That romance really belonged to Emma and Palmer. Just as every book I write, that romance belongs to those characters. Those characters are real to me as I write them, and their reactions are real to me as I write them. And so that is truly their relationship, not mine. But I did, in one instance, I drew on something from my marriage, from my relationship, for a very poignant, very specific conversation that takes place between Emma and Palmer in their relationship. But that's the only piece that, it was helpful to have the personal experience. But beyond that, no, this was their love affair. Truly, this was their love affair.
And it was a well written one at that.
Thanks.
Would you like to read us a little bit from
46? Okay. Yes, sure. Does everybody want me to read? Is that okay? Is that cool with everybody? And let me say, yes. Okay, good. So let me say that as I do this, as I read this, I'm going to set this up for you all by telling you that so far, and so far there are 3 things that I suggest in 46 that have already become reality, or are tangentially, part of reality. So I'm going to set it up by telling you all what those 3 things are. And those of you who have read the book, I suggest that you probably already know the answer to this. And then I'm going to read to you the 4th thing that I predict hasn't happened yet because it's too early, but I'm going to read to you the 4th thing that I double dog guarantee will happen come January 20th. How about that? So the first 3 things I'm going to tell you, I'm going to, tell you the first 3 things that happened that are absolutely true. You all who have read the first chapter of the book did it. And for those of you who watched the Democratic National Convention, I assume you all watched the Democratic National Convention, right? You will understand that one of Emma's themes in her speeches, and particularly in her inauguration, not in her inauguration speech, she talks at length about e pluribus unum. She says, e pluribus unum, out of many, I'm not even going to read it to you, but I'll do it from heart, okay, from memory. She says, e pluribus unum, out of many one, right? This is one of her themes, that we are all as one and we're all in this together. And if those of you who watched the Democratic National Convention back in August will remember, the very first thing Amy Klobuchar said when she got up on stage was, e pluribus unum. And I went, yes. Yes, exactly what Emma said. So that's number 1. Number 2, the number 2 prognostication that has come true, which really floored me, honestly, happened as Kamala Harris was named Joe Biden's running mate. Kamala Harris and every candidate for president and vice president is given a code name by the Secret Service, right? They're given a code name by the Secret Service. And so let me just say, let me see if I can find it right here behind this screen. It's behind door number 1. Door number 2, let's go door number 2. There's door number 2. So I'm just going to read you just a couple lines from chapter 14, where Emma says, well, this is from Emma's perspective, and she's president now, and she wants to go out on a date with Palmer. And she says, this is the way the book goes. It wasn't that she resented the Secret Service, quite the opposite. She was incredibly grateful for their professionalism, their dedication to duty, and for the fact that they kept her safe. But at moments like this, when she only wanted to be a private citizen doing something millions of people did on a regular basis, she longed for the freedom privacy afforded. She sighed and threw open the bedroom door. I'm ready to go, Jamel. Yes, ma'am. The Secret Service agent who had been waiting outside the door murmured into her comms, Pioneer is on the move. As was tradition, Emma had selected the security code name from a list curated by the White House Communications Agency. It had been the name they'd hoped she'd embrace for the historical significance of her candidacy and now her presidency. Guess what, folks? Guess what Secret Service name Kamala Harris chose? Pioneer. Her Secret Service name is Pioneer. And I heard that and I just about fell out of my chair. I'm like, this could only happen in fantasy world, right? There's number two. Number three in the book that has, come to pass. Well, two other things that are, really big coincidences. Chapter 2 of the book, which I'm going to read from in a few minutes, you all will recognize if you've read that far, that one of the things Emma does is go to St. John Cathedral, right? She goes to St. John. Now, St. John, you all might remember a few months ago, featured in the news heavily. Why? Because that's the place that he went, I can't even say it, that he went with and held up the Bible, wrong way, but he held up the Bible as a photo op. That was St. John Cathedral, the place that every president goes to worship on the morning of the inauguration. And so I gave you St. John. In addition to that, I also gave you, and I'm not going to spoil it too much, but I also gave you all the 25th Amendment. I talked about the 25th Amendment and what happens when a president becomes incapacitated, right? We're in the middle of this right now, and there are people who are certainly asking the question, shouldn't he have invoked the 25th Amendment, because he's roid raging on Twitter. So I talked about the 25th Amendment as well. Now, the section I'm going to read from you right now is the section where I predict this will come true on Inauguration Day. So in the book, we're in the place where Emma has, it's inauguration morning, and Emma is staying at the place where incoming candidates stay across the street from the White House. And she's taking this private moment alone in what is a private garden at that residence. So I'm just going to read you a short section there. Not for the first time, Emma wished the occasion called for more practical footwear. She smiled ironically as she recalled Ann Richards's famous quote about Ginger Rogers doing everything Fred Astaire did, but backwards and in high heels. No doubt the deceased governor of Texas would have said the same of a female president. Emma stamped her feet to restore feeling and shivered inside her winter coat. Why couldn't this inauguration day have emulated Ronald Reagan's first inauguration, when the temperature in Washington, D.C. had reached a balmy 55 degrees? She exhaled and watched as her frozen breath rose skyward. At least the sun was shining and the wind had died down a bit after last night's light dusting of snow. She stood by herself in the private, enclosed Ross Garden, not the Rose Garden, the Ross Garden, at the rear of the president's guest house, Blair House, across the street from the White House. In another few hours, she would walk through those iconic doors as President of the United States of America. We made it, Heather. God, she wished her wife were here to give her speech one last bit of polish. Heather was so good at that. Emma bowed her head as the all too familiar stab of pain pierced her heart. They were supposed to be doing this together. Heather should have been holding the McMaster's family Bible as the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court administered the oath of office. In Heather's stead, Emma had invited her mentor, her mother's best friend, and the woman whom she'd grown up emulating to do the honors. Nichelle, her chief of staff, materialized next to her. Madam President-elect, it's time to go to St. John's for the morning service. You have got to stop sneaking up on me. I thought it was part of my job description to be discreet. Is that in the presidential's chief of staff handbook? It worked for Martin Sheen in The American President, not to mention John Spencer on The West Wing. You're shaping your role based on fictional characters you admire? Nichelle shrugged. It works for me. Well, I'll tell you this much. I'm not Michael Douglas. You're not Martin Sheen. We're not playing billiards, and you're not going to get to tell me off in colorful language if you think I have my head up my wazoo. Aw, I was looking forward to that. Emma linked arms with Nichelle as they strolled. Promise me that you'll never let me take myself too seriously. I promise. Emma pulled them up short. And that you'll always tell me the truth, even if I don't want to hear it. You got it. And that you'll keep the crazies away from me. Don't push it. Some of those crazies are your constituents. All of those crazies, at least the American ones, are my constituents, and some of them are elected officials. Too true. Nichelle urged them forward again. Are you really going to stand in the freezing cold without a coat to deliver the inaugural address? I am. It sends a strong signal. Yeah, it tells people their president doesn't have an ounce of common sense. It worked for Kennedy, Reagan, and Clinton. You know, 2 of those 3 got shot and the other one got impeached, right? Okay, maybe those weren't the best examples. We're here, Madam President-elect. One of the Secret Service agents opened the door and Emma stepped out. She was greeted by the rector as she entered the Episcopal Church, where almost every modern day president-elect and vice president-elect attended service on inauguration morning. Emma took her place in the traditional presidential pew, Pew 54, and settled in for the brief service. As much as she tried to take in the details, she couldn't keep her thoughts from straying to the precedent-breaking moment that would come next. For only the fourth time in United States history, here it comes, folks, the incumbent president had chosen not to accompany the president-elect from the White House to the US Capitol for the inauguration. As a student of history, this bothered Emma. Even Woodrow Wilson, who refused to attend his successor Warren G. Harding's inauguration in 1921, rode with the next president to the Capitol before departing. Beyond that, word of the snub was dominating headlines and news shows everywhere, and the hashtag pouting POTUS was trending on Twitter. While that was a modest improvement over the far right's preferred hashtag Leslie go home, it still detracted from the dignity of the occasion and the traditional transition of power. Emma received the letter yesterday on White House stationery signed by the president informing her of his decision. She consoled herself by admitting inwardly that, on a practical level, it would be nice not to have to deal with the awkwardness of the moment. She imagined the photographers snapping away as she and the outgoing president, who at every turn during the course of the campaign had defamed and debased her, exchanged a handshake and an insincere smile as he and his wife boarded Marine One for the last time. No, she wouldn't be sorry to miss that photo op. And I'm just going to go forward a little bit. I'm going to move forward. The plans called for you to go from the service at St. John's directly to the White House, where were to be met by the president at the North Portico and ride together to the Capitol for the oath and inauguration ceremony. I'm familiar with the tradition. Under the circumstances, you'll be going directly from St. John's to the Capitol. I'm concerned you'll be waiting in the holding room for an additional half hour to 45 minutes. Emma hated the idea of cooling her heels in some Capitol anteroom simply because the current resident of the White House rebuffed her. She smiled as the perfect solution presented itself. I know precisely what I want to do with that extra time. If the logistics don't present too much of a nightmare, I'd like to make a stop along the route. A stop? Yes, I think it would send the perfect message if I paused on the way to taking the oath of office to visit the original copies of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the Declaration of Independence. After a moment of silence, the chairman of the inauguration committee replied, "That's brilliant. The National Archives is directly on the route. I'm certain the Secret Service can secure the rotunda without too much trouble. We can allow the press to photograph you. Hold it right there. I'll allow the photo op, but only from a distance looking into the rotunda. I don't want them in the rotunda itself. And I think I'd prefer if this was an unannounced stop." But Emma felt her heart settle. No, this is more than just a photo op for me. The Constitution stands for something. Those documents stand for something, and so do I. I don't want the moment sullied by treating it cynically. Understood, Madam President-elect. We'll make it happen. Please convey my apologies for the last-minute scramble to the committee and the security forces. This isn't your fault. Maybe not, but it's going to inconvenience people. Emma considered. If possible, I'd prefer it if the archives themselves remained open during my visit, and only the rotunda was unavailable to the public. I don't want to deprive visitors of the opportunity to spend time at one of the most important treasures in our capital. I'm not sure the Secret Service is going to like that, but we'll do our best. I know you will. So there you go. There is my prediction. My prediction for what's going to happen on Inauguration Day. And I predict, additionally, that that man and his wife will take off at exactly noon on Marine One from the White House lawn in order to try to detract from the inauguration of Joe Biden.
Mm. I wouldn't be surprised.
Just my crystal ball at work.
Well, we have a lot of questions that are coming in here. So how about we get to them?
Let's do.
So I'm looking at the chat here. We'll go through those first.
Sure.
I think we did touch upon this in your intro. Rom Blend 3 Heart asks, you could tell you were an experienced speechwriter. Did you ever write a speech like this for a politician? And we had, in your intro, we talked about that you wrote for several different levels within the political area, presidents, governors, and state senators. Do you want to maybe just touch on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I sure did write speeches. It was part of what I did. And for instance, I had a line in a speech that Bill Clinton gave in the year would have been, I think, 1994, when he was campaigning for president. If I'm not mistaken, I think I got that right, 1993, 1994, somewhere in there. In any event, so I got to write a line in one of his speeches. I wrote many speeches for Governor Cuomo, the original Governor Cuomo, Mario Cuomo, pieces of speeches about crime and criminal justice. I wrote pieces of speeches about other things for him. I think I had a line in his famous Notre Dame speech that he gave to the Democrat, and one that he gave to the Democratic National Convention at one point. I wrote a lot of testimony to Congress for both for the senator that I worked for, as well as for the Commissioner of Corrections when I was working there as well, and he was called to testify. So I have, a lot of experience with that kind of thing, and that was one of the most fun things that I got to do, because you have to really be able to hear the speaker's cadence in your head in order to be able to write a good speech for them. So for instance, Mario Cuomo had a very distinct speaking style, much like Barack Obama has a very distinct speaking style. And so it was always a joy to write a speech or part of a speech for Mario Cuomo, because I could hear him in my head and I knew what words he has troubles with. This is something you don't really think about, but a lot of speakers like that have difficulty with certain sounds, certain words. And so when you write speeches for them, you have to be very certain not to use those syllables and those words with which they have difficulty. So it isn't about, how how it sounds for you to speak it. You have to envision it how it would sound for that particular speaker to say it. And so that's it's an art form, really, and it's a challenge, and I really enjoy the challenge a whole lot. I hope that answered the question, right? No.
You have a question around, assuming this is, I guess, maybe if this were to go to film or Netflix, or
my grandmother would say, from your mouth to God.
Who would you cast to play Emma and Palmer?
Ooh,
what actresses?
Would that I had the choice. I don't know. Who would you guys like to see? What do you think? I mean, these are two women who are in their 50s, right? So they're not youngsters. So let's see, actresses.
Redhead would, I think of Gillian Anderson. For the redhead for Palmer. She would do a good Emma or Palmer.
Yeah, and that's not a bad suggestion. Patricia Tallman. I don't know who that is. Who's Patricia Tallman? I don't know who that is. Now I'm gonna have to go Google her so that I can see what she looks like. I don't know. I tend not to, for the most part, Babylon 5. No wonder I don't know who she is. I tend, for the most part, not to picture characters in my head, picture actresses in my head as I'm writing characters, because the characters are unique to me. The only time that I have ever truly known who would play one of my roles was All That Lies Within. And I can tell you without any hesitation whatsoever who would play the role of Dara Thomas, and that is Charlize Theron. And I'd take her for either one of these roles too. But I'd take her. Any role she wants to play in one of my movies is fine with me. Because number one, she's badass, and number two, I mean, I think she could really carry it off. So there you go. There's a choice for you.
There you go. Will we see a 47?
Susan Green, I love you. I saw that question flash across. I don't know yet. I really haven't thought that far ahead about whether there'll be a sequel to this or not. It's hard to say. Because part of me thinks, well, when Joe Biden and Kamala Harris win, let's just assume that Joe serves one term and Kamala becomes number 47. Then what in the world would you need my book for? Really? Because it's already real. So we shall see. I don't know. And I don't know. Right now, I am I'm back working on Dot Wilkinson's official biography, nonfiction. And honestly, I can't think past that to see what else fiction wise is next for me. It's not clear to me yet, which is, don't panic. I mean, that's not nearly unusual for me. Usually I don't know until I'm ready to write the next thing, what it's going to be. So, um, we're going to have to wait and see on that. I saw something flash through a while ago about Geraldine Ferraro. Somebody said something about Geraldine Ferraro. I had the great honor not only of meeting Geraldine Ferraro when she was running for vice president, but I drove her. I took her on a 3-hour drive. She wanted to visit a New York State prison, and I took her on the drive to the prison, and then I took her back to the airport. And she was an extraordinary woman. What an extraordinary 3 or 4 hours I had alone in the car with her, talking about everything. It was really, really remarkable. And I do not know. Well, I don't remember. I think at one point I did know what her Secret Service name was, but I don't remember what it was. They don't ever give someone the same name twice. So if Pioneer had already been used, it wouldn't have been available to Kamala Harris, in answer to your question.
So Anne Hagen, she asks, I must be missing something here, but did you ever consider a certain politician in a lesbian role as the model for Emma, given all of the speculation that she really is a closeted lesbian or bisexual?
I assume she's talking about Hillary Clinton. I don't want to defame Hillary Clinton, and I don't know whether that is true or false. It's hard. It's hard for me to say. Good pick, Anne. No, the short answer to your question. Nope. No, I had a lot of friends who worked for Hillary, but no.
There's a question about COVID-19 being talked about while you were writing the book, and why did you not include it in
Good,
46?
Excellent. Who asked that? Who asked that?
That was from Alberta Robinson.
Alberta, that's a fabulous question. And anytime you want to come refinish my furniture, you can come. I thought the thing you did today, it was amazing. That's just incredible. So the answer to your question, and I've got to remember what the question was.
About COVID and why.
No, you get to be my age and you start forgetting stuff just like that. I mean, 5 seconds later. And you also get to have hot flashes, as you all can see. I apologize for that. So the answer to your question is yes, the pandemic hit right in the middle of my writing 46. The pandemic started. And obviously I thought about it because this was a real time, this is a real time issue in a real time book, essentially. And so we all know that during the time frame I'm presenting in this book, COVID has happened. But I made a conscious decision not to go there because I just felt like it's too new, it's too fresh, it's too unpredictable. We don't know where this thing is going. I suspect that more people would like to escape from this than would like to, relive it at this point in time. I imagine that going forward, there'll be some point in history where it feels okay to write about this time in history, but now to me didn't feel like that moment. And so I made a very conscious decision not to go there. I didn't want to go there, honestly. I just felt like you all had enough of COVID living it every day, and so had I. And it's left for another time. And like I said, it was too unpredictable. As it was, there was an instance in the book. I had a scene written, a complete chapter written in the book that I had to rip out and come up with something completely different because the thing that I was suggesting happened the night after I wrote it. So it was an attack on the Iraqi embassy. I don't know if you remember, it was months ago. There was an attack on the Iraqi embassy, on the US embassy in Iraq. And I had just finished writing this whole thing about an attack on that embassy. And I ripped it up and I threw it out because, based on what was happening in real time, I was not at all certain that by the time this book came out, there would still be a US embassy in Iraq. And as you know, right now they're talking about getting rid of that embassy. So it was just too, it was too iffy. I wasn't sure that it would hold over time. So there you go. Instead, I kidnapped people. There you go.
I'm going to ask one another question before we get back to the list in chat. The way that you wrote the start of the relationship between Emma and Palmer, where it was like they had spent a little bit of time together, and then all of a sudden they had to, it was either all or nothing, but right away.
Right.
Was that just because that's how it worked for the writing, or was that something that you heard through like maybe other politicians or other people in high level, high exposure worlds where it has to be that way? What made you start their relationship the way that you wrote it?
I'm really glad you asked that question because of, I don't always read reviews, but when I first put a book out, I look at reviews because I want to know how people perceive the book. You write a book and then you put it out into the world. And the truth of it is that the book is no longer yours at that point. The book becomes yours, it becomes the reader's. So it's your experience that you bring to what I've written. And so what I have intended may not be the way you take it. But here are a few things about the way I started Emma and Palmer's relationship. First of all, from a personal standpoint, anybody who is of a certain age. um, yeah,
Yep.
Anybody who is of a certain age, and just for full disclosure's sake, I have a very big birthday coming up on Saturday. I'll be it's impossible to think of myself in those terms, but I'm going to be 60, which I never thought would happen. Live my life really and get to 60. Huh, who knew? In any event, so let me say this: anybody who is of a certain age who has fallen in love after 50 understands that there is a sense of urgency to it because more of your life is behind you than it is in front of you. And, at this point, you've probably had some relationships, you've certainly had some experience. You tend to know what you're looking for, know where you are in your life, be well established career wise. And you've gone through all of those dating phases and all of the stuff that you do in your 20s and your 30s and maybe even into your 40s, who knows. But my point is, by the time you are at that stage in life, you know what you want and you know if something works or it doesn't work for you. So I think part of it, part of the reason that some readers have questioned how quickly they fall in love is the fact that they don't have any personal frame of reference. They're younger and they don't have a personal frame of reference for how this could be. And, also full disclosure, as a bunch of you know my story, I fell in love well after 50 and it didn't take long to figure it out. Now, in addition to that, she is the president of the United States. She has the glare of such a spotlight on her. And the truth of the matter is that for a president, and remember that my background is advising people like this in crisis communication situations. So a person in that situation doesn't have the luxury of going out to coffee 5 or 6 times to try to feel you out and figure it out, because the first time she steps out there, it's going to be photographed and documented and so on and so forth. And Palmer is a very private person, not out in her career, not really out anywhere. She's a 4-star general. And, so for her to agree to a date with Emma is an automatic, you're out of the closet. You're out of the closet. You have no choice. You have no choice, which is why you must be very, very certain that you are okay with this and that this is someone you really want to risk that for. Mm-hmm. So you have these dueling realities for them, essentially. And, you have to fish or cut bait. Now, I'd also point out to you that it took them more than 2 years to get to that point. Just because I didn't show everything through those 2 years doesn't mean it didn't take them a long time thinking about it, considering it, wishing, hoping,
waiting.
Watching. What was that?
They were waiting and a lot
Waiting.
of waiting. There
Yeah,
was a lot
a
of
lot of
waiting in
waiting
that
going on.
time.
But if I had written all that waiting, you guys would have been bored out of your minds. You'd have been bored out of your minds, right? So at some point, I have to show you that time has passed, and yet I have to also honor them and honor what the truth would be. And the truth would be that this would be a very, very public thing. And, and Emma is right to say to Palmer, are you sure about this? Because as soon as we walk out of that door, everybody is going to say something. And you better know where you want this to go. Because if you have any doubt, if you are not certain, we can't go forward. And that is absolutely real. And I would defend it to my last breath.
I'm going to go back to our chat. So Joanne asked, weren't you in a prison riot? This is,
Yes.
Yeah, in New York.
Yes, and that's yes or no question you should ask. Yes. The short answer to your question is yes. I was right in the middle of a riot of 450 high maximum security inmates in Attica State Correctional Facility in upstate New York in 1990. And look, I'm still here. Made it to 60.
I'm just going to read a note from Ann Hagen. I felt like the reviews that were harsh didn't understand the military need Palmer had for discretion and to keep separated. I felt like they knew what they wanted up front, just had to wait to be together and not unlike a long distance relationship.
Right. That's very true.
Several comments about
thank you. You're welcome for me depicting.
Thank you for depicting.
Yeah.
And there was also a question or a comment that there is a Wikipedia page that lists the Secret Service code name of all presidents and vice presidents.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Who knew?
Would anybody like
research?
Anybody like to ask a question? If you want to unmute yourself.
Gina Davis is Emma. Ooh, there's a thought. Yep.
Anyone else have a question? Angie Harmon. So I know we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but what is your view of our current political climate? Just as far as,
Disgusting.
having been in the midst of politics yourself, and then how are you dealing with it?
I'm doing my best to hold on to hope, to look at the signs that I see. My wife Cheryl and I are working very hard. We have been texting thousands and thousands of voters here in North Carolina, which is a very tight race, as you know, and a very important race in this country. It's a swing state and a tight one. And actually, we have agreed to get out of our COVID bubble where we have been since the beginning of February, honestly, in order to be poll observers outside during early voting. We chose not to do that on election day because it is our strong feeling that most of the people who will be voting on election day are not going to be of our persuasion, and I really don't want it to get ugly. So there's that. So how are we coping with it? We are taking the action steps that we believe we can to do the most that we can to affect the outcome of this election. And we have been donating, not just on the high levels, but we've been donating a lot to US Senate races where we think we have a very real possibility and probability of flipping a state. So it's money, it's work, it's time, and it makes us, at least it gives us a sense of empowerment that we are standing in our power and doing something about this, not just sitting there worrying about it. Because, it takes the same amount of energy to be positive and to have hope that it does to stay in a place of fear, and fear is a heavier emotion. So, we're doing everything we can to stay positive. We have tried very hard to, it's hard not to watch the news. I mean, things that would have been a 2-week headline are like a two-minute headline now. I'm glad I'm not in the media anymore because it's virtually impossible. It's impossible to keep up. But with regard to the current situation and where we are, what has become of our federal government in the last few years is just disgusting, honestly. And this is truly, as Joe says, it's a fight for the soul of our country. It is a fight for our democracy, is what they say. Truly, this is a fight for our democracy. This will be, and I am a student of history, this will be the most consequential election of our lifetimes. The most consequential election of our lifetimes. And, it's now or never, folks. I honestly, truly believe that we've got this. I see a lot of hopeful signs, particularly the last few days. I've seen some cracks in the armor. I've seen a lot of hopeful signs. It is very understandable that so many of us are in a place where we have a little PTSD because we all saw what happened in 2016. We took things for granted, and then we got, completely got our pins blown out from under us, as you would say. But, the truth of it is, I think that Joe is the right man for the right time. He may not have been your first choice. He might not have been your second choice, but under the circumstances we are in right now, he is the choice that many Americans in the middle, or what we used to call moderate Republicans, will see as a fair alternative, as a non-threatening alternative, at least to bring back sanity to our country. And, I have a lot of friends who are fairly high up in government. They're what Donald Trump calls the deep state, right? These are people who have worked through multiple administrations, Democrat and Republican. And, it's next to impossible to work in that environment right now. And it's disgusting. I mean, these are people who are experts in their fields. And it's so difficult to be them right now. So hug a government worker today is well, you can't virtually hug a government worker today, would you? And take the action steps you're guided to take to help. Make yourself a plan to vote. Make sure you have one. Our plan, so I'll share it with you, is we have our absentee ballots. We do not plan to fill them out unless we have difficulty voting early. We're going to try to vote early just because we would like our votes to be counted on election day. And some states will count their absentee ballots in advance. Some won't count them until election day. Some won't count them until after election day. I want to be certain my vote is counted on election day because I would like a landslide on election night that is irrefutable. So we are going to try to find a time to vote early when there's not a big crowd, and so we don't have to worry about anything like that. And that's our first line. And we're going to take our empty absentee ballots and turn them back in so that people know we voted once. You can only vote once. And barring that, we will fill it, if we can't find a good time to vote early, then we will fill out those absentee ballots and drive them to the Board of Elections and drop them off personally, hand to hand. That's our plan. Make sure you have a plan. Vote as early as you can. Convince at least 3 friends to vote also. And, send them to iwillvote.com, I think is a great site. Fairfight.com is another one if they need to know if they're registered or what to do or how to vote. All those things, all those questions are answered in places like that. There's my speech, my stump speech.
Well, excellent. There is a question about the timeline for Dot's, the work that you're doing now, which would have been one of my last questions for you is, what are you working on? What's in the pipeline? Dot, I think is up next, right? She's on deck. She's on deck.
Dot is right now. Dot is about to turn. She'll turn 99 on Friday. In fact, I just got off the phone with her. I talk to her every single night. Sandy says vote411.org is the League of Women Voters. It's another great site as well. Thanks, Sandy, for that. So I'm working on Dot's book. I find it actually harder to work right now than I did when I was working on 46, just because 46 was my love letter to all of you. And I knew that it was time sensitive and I needed to get it out. And I was able to, really to sit and focus because that's how I thought of that book. Dot's book has been a little bit more challenging. I've been writing it. In essence, I've been writing this book for more than a decade now. I do hope to have it done in the next few months. And once that happens, I'm actually going to shop it to a major publisher and we'll see what happens with that. We'll see how that goes. I have a time frame in my mind for how long I'm willing to let that go on. And, if it isn't out there in a certain amount of time, then I'll publish it myself as a hardback full of pictures and wait for somebody to pick up the movie.
So we are just at our time that we had discussed breaking so that we could give people a chance to
Sure.
actually re-engage in the real political world. But Lynn, thank you for giving us a glimpse into our future. I like to refer to this book as a future historical fiction.
Oh, that's great. Can I
I
just say
really,
thank you all for coming?
yeah,
I'm really so grateful that you all took time out of your night to be here with me. And thank you for reading 46. Thank you for, for paying attention and for hanging in there. You guys all hang in there. It's going to be all right. You'll see. You'll see. Go ahead, Anne. Back to
yeah.
you.
Thank you for joining us. And I wanted to remind everyone very quickly that next up is the In the Silences with Rachel Gold is going to join us on November 4th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So please make sure that if you haven't already gone out to GCLS goldencrown.org events page to register for the November event with Rachel. She's another amazing author, and I'm sure this next one from her that she's going to read from is just as good as all of her others. So hopefully you could sign up for that, and then we'll see you back here in another month. And that will be after the election. So everybody hang on. And again, Lynn, thank you for giving us a different story to make us feel better about the world that we're in right now.
You know what? It's going to be okay, folks. It's going to be okay.
Yeah. Thanks again. And thank you everybody for joining us this evening.